book I chose to read today was Sweet Clara and the Freedom Quilt by Deborah Hopkinson. Before I was even 12 years old, I got sent from North Farm to Home Plantation because they needed another field hand. When I got there, I cried so much they thought I was never going to eat or drink again. I didn't want to leave my mama. I'm going back to her, I whispered every day to young Jack, who worked beside me in the fields. Well, you better start eating all you can, sweet Clara, he smiled at me. But then his smile was gone. In a low voice he said, or else you won't make it. Young Jack helped me believe I'd get back to my mama someday. Truth was, I'd be lost before I got through the fields, them being so big and all. But I didn't give up my dreaming. Aunt Rachel was raising me now. She wasn't my for-real blood aunt, but she did her best to care for me. One night she come back from working in the big house and found me lying dead tired on the cabin floor. She shook her head and said, Sweet Clara, you ain't gonna last in the fields. But I got an idea. Aunt Rachel's idea was sewing, and she started teaching me the very next night. It wasn't easy for me to learn, my hands already rough and clumsy from hoeing and weeding the fields. So Aunt Rachel took it real slow. She brought scraps of cloth from the big house and taught me about each one, how it was special and how it to be treated in its own way. I liked to piece the scraps together to make pretty patterns of colors, but Aunt Rachel didn't care much about pretty patterns. Now you rip out that whole row and do it again, Clara, she say. Why, I got to make the stitches so tiny, I complained. You're going to be a real seamstress, that's why. Tomorrow you're coming with me to the big house. I got it all worked out, Aunt Rachel say one day. I was frightened. You ready to sew with me, she went on. Mrs. daughter Ella be getting married come spring. I told Mrs. I'd be needing help. So look at your work with sharp eyes, Clara. So do it quick and neat like I taught you. Next morning I tried to eat some cornbread, but my insides were all knotted up. I've never been inside the big house before or seen white people that close. Kept the overseer. The morning sun was streaming into the sewing room, turning everything all sunflower yellow. Aunt Rachel gave me some sheets to hem. Instead of being contrary, that the needle did all I wanted, just like it was part of my hand. At the end of the day, Mrs. come in. Let me see your work, Clara, she say. I gave her the sheet, and she ran in through her hands, real slow. I held my breath watching. From now on, come here, she said at last. When she left, Aunt Rachel and I looked at each other, about ready to burst. We done it, girls, she cried. So I changed my field hand to a seamstress. Since the sewing room was right off the kitchen, Aunt Rachel and I were near cook and the helpers. There was always lots of bustle and company in the kitchen. I was hearing all about the kinds of new places and things. I listened so hard it felt like my ears must be growing right out of my head and getting big with listening. One day, 2 white men come to see the master. The drivers went into the kitchen to talk to cook. There'd been too many runaways last summer. One of the drivers said, they're going round asking all the masters in the country to join the patrollers. Crazy running away, muttered cook as she bat up some batter. Where you going to get to see lost in the swamp? Don't know, said the other, but I hear we ain't that far from the Ohio River. Once you get that far, the Underground Railroad will carry you across. That's right, agreed the first. The railroad will get you all the way to Canada. Then you're free forever. Cook snorted. If it be that easy as you two let on, more would have gone. One of the men replied in a quiet voice, It'd be easy if you could get a map. Walking back from the big house that evening, I asked Aunt Rachel about what I've heard. Where's Canada? And what's the Underground Railroad? See there, Aunt Rachel pointed. That's the North Star. Under the star far up north is Canada. The Underground Railroad is people who've been helping folks get there, secret-like. So look at me hard. But you don't start asking, thinking about it. You run away and get caught, you be beaten. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Next day I asked Cook, those 2 men that were here yesterday, they were talking about a map. What's a map? Just a picture of the land, that's all. Whatever's one on the ground, a map can have it. Sunday I went to my favorite place on the little hill and looked at the people's cabins in the fields. I took a stick and started making a picture in the dirt of all I could see. But how could I make a picture of things far away that I couldn't see? And how can I make a map that wouldn't be washed away by the rain? A map that could show the way to freedom. Then one day I was sewing a patch on a pretty blue blanket. The patch looked just the same shape as the cow pond near the cabins. The little stitches looked like a path going all around it. Here it is, a picture that wouldn't wash away. A map. So I started the quilt. When you sew in, no matter how careful you be, little scraps of cloth always be left after you cut out a dress or a pillowcase. So while my ears kept listening, my hands kept sewing. I began to squirrel away these bits of cloth. When we was off work, I went to visit people in the quarters. I started asking what fields was where. Then I started piecing the scraps of cloth with the scraps of things I was learning. Aunt Rachel say, "Sweet Clara, what kind of pattern are you making in that quilt?" "Ain't no pattern I ever seen." "I don't know, Aunt Rachel. I'm just patching it together as I go." She looked at me long, but she nodded. There was a buzzing in the quarters one summer evening. I saw the patrollers and I knew someone had run away. It was young Jack, but 5 days later they caught him. That next Sunday I went to see him and we walked to the top of the little hill. He didn't smile the way he used to. I took a stick and began to draw it in the dirt. I drew a little square for the big house. I lined up boxes for the cabins of the quarters and some bigger squares for the fields east of the big house. I drew as much as I pieced together. Jack sat beside me, not saying anything, not even looking at first. Then he started seeing what I was doing. I handed the stick to him. I hear him catch his breath up quick. Then he began to draw.